First is that you have a Wacom tablet of some sort, and second, you have no experience using it within Illustrator. Now personally, I have this Wacom Cintiq 22 HD, which is basically a monitor that you can draw on, but don't let that discourage you from proceeding if you have something different. It's all very similar. Now, the first thing we need to do is to configure our tablet specifically for use within Illustrator. Now for Wacom products, this is done within the Wacom Tablet properties. You can either access it by searching for the phrase Wacom within your OS, or by touching the button on your tablet if it has a shortcut as shown here on my Cintiq. So once I click that, it brings up the Wacom Tablet properties. Now this is the way it works. We have 3 rows at the top: Device, Tools, and Applications. And again, you may not have these columns if you're using something like the Intuos Draw tablets, but it's still very similar in structure. At the top, it will feature your Wacom device. Then we have Tools, which may or may not have all of these options here. It may have more. And then we also have Applications, and this also may look differently. It may have other applications if you added them or not. The thing that we want to focus on, though, is under Tool, we want to use Functions. And as you can see, for Functions, we have Applications added here. And this is what we want, Illustrator. So if you do not have that added, it's very simple. All you have to do is click this plus icon, and under here it says Select Application, and then it says Currently Open Applications. It lists all of these right here. Now, if you don't see Illustrator, make sure you open it and then click this plus button, and it will show it right here. You select it and then hit OK, and it will add it right here to this list. Okay, so what's shown in the settings portion of here may also differ from what you see. And again, it's all based on which Wacom product you have. Now, instead of the touch strip, yours may say touch ring. You may not even have this display toggle tab right here, but don't let any of that discourage you or confuse you. Our goal right now is just to set up a few express keys that we can use within Illustrator. That's it. Now, express keys are just buttons on your tablet that you can use as shortcuts to perform common tasks. So I have 8 over here and also 8 on the right side as well. Although we're only just going to use 4 or 5. All right, so just to show you, if we choose express keys, mine has this left and right option to specify the commands for each of these. So under left, I want to focus at the bottom. Now each of these keys, as you can see, has a drop-down menu, and we could choose all these from all these different options. So if you just want a keystroke to be recorded when you press it or activated, you click on keystroke, and then right here under keys, it will by default have this text area specified, and you could just hit any key or combination of keys like Control Z, which is undo, and it will automatically record it right here. And then you can give this a name such as undo, and then hit OK. So my very bottom express key I use for undoing things. Very simple. The modifier down here, the second from the bottom, I've chosen a modifier, and that just simply means Shift, Alt, Control, or for clicks, left, middle, and right. So for the modifier, I choose Shift, and that allows me to draw straight up and down, or straight or on a 0-degree angle, or on a 45-degree angle. And then also I have over here a keystroke. The blob brush is Shift B, which is default in Illustrator. And then also a keystroke on the very top of these 4, which is simply B, and that loads the brush tool. And then finally, I also have the zoom tool mapped to this 5th one right here. And that's another keystroke, and I'll show you that real quick. And that's simply Z. All right, so that is basically it. That's the only thing I want you to set up is just some express keys so that we can have quick access to commonly used functions and tools here within Adobe Illustrator. All right, so once you have that done, you can test them out. And right now I'm on the Move tool, and all I have to do is click on this top one to get to brush. This is the blob brush. And then I can undo these as well. Or if I want to draw perfectly straight up and down, I can hold the modifier Shift right here, just like that. All right, so in the next clip, we're going to go ahead and focus on using the brush tool here in Illustrator. Hello and welcome to this clip where we're going to get started working with the tools here in Illustrator for use with our tablet. Now the first tool that we're going to look at is the brush tool, and it's one of the most popular tools to use in conjunction with a drawing tablet. So first, let's click New here, and this will bring up this dialog box, and we'll create a new document. I'm just going to leave it at these current settings right here, 1200 by 800. You can adjust this accordingly, and also make sure we have color mode RGB, and we'll hit OK. Okay, so the brush tool is simply located right here, and if you set up express keys and a shortcut like I did, you can also access it that way. Now, if we just brush by the default settings, it's not very exciting. We can press as hard as we want or as light as we want, and we can notice that the brush stroke stays the same. And of course, we can adjust this as we need to with the options. So first, I'm going to go ahead and back up. And the area where you control settings that are specific to the brush is located by double clicking or double tapping with your stylus the icon over here on brush, and this brings up the paintbrush tool options. All right, so there's several different areas here. So we have fidelity. Now fidelity by default is usually left right here in the center of this slider. If we move this all the way to accurate and hit OK, and I draw lines like this, just a scribble, we'll see that the resulting stroke is very similar to what I drew out. Now if I back up and I double click once again and change the fidelity to smooth, and I draw a very similar stroke, we'll see how it smoothens everything out quite a bit. So generally speaking, I like to leave it somewhere over here or over here. Although if I'm trying to draw something that's a real smooth sort of Bezier curve, I will move it over all the way here as well. So it all depends on what you're trying to do. All right, so down here we also have options. So the first is fill new brush strokes. Well, fill it with what? Well, let's go ahead and see what exactly that means. Now first, before I draw a stroke, let's switch to swatches over here, and we'll change our foreground color from white to a red. And I'm just going to draw something like this. Well, that's what that option did. It fills the fill color based on your stroke. So by default, I usually leave that off. So I'm going to come back here, we'll double click, and I'll deselect that. Keep selected. Well, let's try that. So if I draw a stroke, you can see that it has this blue path with these anchor points, and it automatically keeps your previously drawn out stroke selected. And you can see if I draw on top of one of these anchor points, it will also affect the direction of that path. All right, I'm going to back up real quick. We'll double click this. This is also something that I generally leave deselected. And then edit selected paths is if I leave this on and leave keep selected on as well, just like we had before, we'll see if I draw a path real quick and I draw over it, it's going to edit it. However, if I double click this to bring up the options again and I deselect that and I try to do the same thing, it's not going to edit it. All right. So let me double click over here once again. And by default, I usually leave it with these settings here. And this within slider right here, 12 pixels, simply means if you're clicking close enough to a given anchor point within 12 pixels, then it will edit the path. Okay, so now the next section I want to look at is in the brushes panel. So if we click on brushes, and by the way, you can go to window up here and find brushes if you don't see it. We'll see that we have these initial brushes right here. And if we double click on them, we have the calligraphic brush options. Now we can rename this if we wish, but the main point that we want to look at is right here where it says angle, roundness, size, as well as this drop down. Okay, so the angle by default we have is at 0. Now if we change this angle, it's just going to change this. The actual stroke is not going to get changed at all. It's really dependent on this roundness being changed as well. in order for the angle to take effect. So if I change this now, we can see that the angle definitely is now no more noticeable than before when the roundness was just at 100%. So we could see what this looks like if I start drawing. Based on the angle of my hand and how I was drawing, we could see that certain parts of it are thicker and others are not. So if we come back here, now the size, this part is where we want to adjust. If we make it a little bit larger so we could see it. If we change this here from fixed, which means it's basically a constant rate, from fixed to pressure, and we take this variation slider all the way up to 21 points. And also you can notice when we change the slider, it's changing this preview right here as well, saying from your very lightest pressure where you're barely touching the tablet, that's how small it will be. From the middle strength in terms of pressure right here, and then to your most pressure, which would be up to 19. So if we take this pressure variation all the way to 21 points and hit OK, I'm going to start out lightly and then start pressing harder at various points. It's a little bit difficult to tell the difference here when you have the roundness adjusted. So if I keep the roundness at 100% and leave this pressure variation here, we can now see this a little bit better. Real light, real thick, real light, etc. Okay, so if I double click back on this again, you can notice as well up here we can adjust the angle and the roundness by this little icon. So we can drag these in and we can change this as well. So it's just kind of a quicker method to be able to change this. Now these other options down here, if we change this to random based on each of our individual strokes, it will change it to a random sort of based on the variation as well. We have pressure, we have stylus wheel, tilt, bearing, and rotation. Usually I keep the pressure here on the size and I leave these on as fixed. But I do suggest experimenting with these. All right, so usually if I want to draw sort of like a calligraphy piece, of course I'll keep the roundness something like a flat like this. But generally speaking, I'll just leave it at 100% and I'll do most of my illustration work that way. All right, so that is the basic rundown of how you adjust the settings specific to the paintbrush. So in the next lesson, we're going to take a specific look at the blob brush. All right, I'll see you then. All right, hello and welcome to this clip where we're going to take a look at the blob brush tool. Now the blob brush is very similar to the brush tool with one slight difference. So first let's take a look at its settings. Now to access this tool, we can simply take here, hold down with our mouse button or our stylus and drag out and select it, or hit Shift B or click on our express keys if you set it up. Now what we want to do is double click on the tool to bring up the tool options. Now it's very similar to the brush tool options, and the one difference is by default it has a default brush options at the bottom already included here. It does have the keep selected option, merge only with selection, and the fidelity slider as well. So I'm just going to hit OK on this, and we're going to select this section right here. And this is from the previous clip where I already set this up. You can match mine if you wish, and we'll hit OK. So one key difference that you can notice right away without even drawing a stroke is we have this little circle that's around the brush icon. And I can adjust that with my touch strip on my tablet. And I can change this to control that by clicking on the middle button between my express keys, where I'm able to toggle between what this touch strip will be able to adjust. So I'm clicking on this, I'm just going to choose brush size right here. So now when I drag up, or drag down rather, it's going to make it larger. And when I brush the other way with my finger, it's making it smaller. So I'm just going to draw, and you could see right away it's showing the anchor points in the paths. So it's not a stroke in the traditional sense that you have a stroke path. Now, if I draw a very similar stroke here, except with the brush tool right here, and I take my move tool and I click on it, we'll see that we have just a single path right here, and it has a stroke. And that's how this is adjusted. Now, if we take the stroke up here where it says 1 point by default and we increase it to 2 points, we'll see how it makes it thicker automatically. And we can also take it back down, and we can actually have a finer control if we simply change this to, say, a 0.3, and you can go real thin as well. We do not have that option with the blob brush tool. Now, yes, you can give it a stroke if we increase this, but sometimes that can produce unwanted artifacts, so that's not the ideal way. Usually you would use the blob brush if you know you're drawing paths and objects that you're not going to need to thicken up or bolden. All right, so that is the key difference between the blob brush and the regular brush tool. Now, a couple side notes to mention with this is with the brush tool's stroke right here, you can also convert these to paths just like this. And the way you do that is to select it. We'll go to Object, Path, and we choose Outline Stroke. You can also choose Expand Appearance as well. And we can see now it becomes a path just like this, except we have no longer the option of editing the stroke up here. All right. So with that said, in the next lesson, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the eraser tool right here. I'll see you then.